So first, I'm going to take home.psd and open it in Photoshop. Now, don't worry if you don't have much experience with Photoshop. I'm going to work through each step, but I will assume you have a modest understanding of, for example, the move tool will allow me to move my canvas and things like that. So if you're not familiar with it, just follow along and it should begin to click eventually. So the way we convert a PSD to HTML is first, we don't slice anything out. We begin by creating our HTML as we always have. So this is a good point to start analyzing how we would create the markup for this. As I see things, we have a header at the very top. We do have a wrapper because notice this entire website is centered as we've learned to do. So it makes sense to have some kind of wrapper and then the header. And we could include this part with the header as well. That's just up to us. And then we have some information about the services they offer. And then finally at the bottom we have a footer. So notice this is a very common layout. You have your header, you have maybe a banner, and then you have some information below and your footer. This is quite common for all websites, so you should get used to it fairly quickly. So let's get started. I'm going to open up our project within Sublime and we have a blank slate. The first step is to create the markup, and we're going to take advantage of Zen coding, which I taught you in a previous lesson. If you're also working along in Sublime Text and you have Zen coding installed, you can press Control-Option-Enter, and that's going to bring up this panel right here. And what's nice about this is you can write your Zen coding, but it is displayed on the page in real time, so you know exactly what you're getting. For example, if I type ULLI, you see that it's updating instantly. So let's get started. We're going to begin by building a div with a class of container. Let's refer back. And within here, we're going to have a header element. We know that for sure. So let's do that. Header. And within the header element, we have an H1 tag that says black and white. So we'll do H1, black plus white. And then he also has a navigation section, and we're going to place that within the header as well. So we're going to create a sibling to the H1. Notice if I did this, it would add within the H1, but we need a sibling. Now we know a nav will contain a list of navigation links, so I will add a UL. And within the list item here, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has 5 list items. And each list item, of course, this should be clickable because it's a link. So we'll place an anchor tag that links to nowhere for the time being. And that looks good for now. So I will hit enter for that to take effect. And now I can tab through each one of these. I'm going to fill these in really quickly. So good, we are done with the wrapper and the header, but we should probably place these two images within it as well. Now, how do you convert images that have text? Because we want it to be searchable. So in this case, he has a background image, but for our project, we're going to use HTML to add the text within it. So really, we just need a section for the image. So for the time being, right after the navigation, we'll have a image, but I would like to be able to target it. And because it's the only image within the header, maybe we can leave it blank for now. But if we need to be more specific, we can always add a class later. And then next, right here, this is blank, and that means it could be anything. It could be another stock photo. It could be anything at all. He's left it blank for this case. So we will as well. The next step is to work on our main content area. So let's use that keyword main. I'm going to create a new div with a class of main. And within it, we have 3 columns essentially. So why don't we separate these, and we'll say each one will have a div, and we'll give it a class of grid. And because we know that we're going to use eventually the 960 framework, which we discussed, and that's 12 columns, we can figure this out on our own, even though we haven't yet implemented the 960 framework. And let's consider this. It's not divided into thirds because these two right here are much wider than this one. So why don't we consider maybe, rather than each column being a grid 4 for 1/3, 4 times 3 is 12, why don't we say 5, 5, that's 10, and then we need 2 more, which is 12. And we can play around with it if we need to. So we'll say grid 5, and why don't we create 2 of those. Now within each one is going to be a H1 tag, and I'm going to leave that blank. And then after that, we have just some gibberish text. So I will add a paragraph after each one as well. And I'm going to hit enter so I can tab through these.